It's time for my daily interview series, Money Talks. Joining me today is Belinda Kirk, an explorer and leading campaigner in promoting the benefits of adventure on well-being. For the past 25 years, she started as a child, has led dozens of international expeditions and remote filming trips, including sailing across the Atlantic to searching for camels in China's desert of death. And that's not the half of it. Belinda's held numerous youth development challenges, pioneered inclusive expeditions for people with disabilities, managed scientific research missions in the Amazon, Sinai and Alaska, and has even gained a Guinness World Record for rowing unsupported around Britain. Is there anything this woman can't do? And in 2009, she established Explorers Connect, a non-profit business connecting people to adventure, and that's encouraged 30,000 people to engage in outdoor challenges. Belinda, amazing stuff. How did you get into this? Were you a kind of wild child?
That's a good question, actually. I was very lucky back sort of in the 70s when I think we all had a bit of a freer childhood, and I was very lucky. I grew up for the early part of my childhood on Alderney, one of the Channel Islands.
Oh, right, yeah.
And literally the word feral was often used about my...
Just running free.
Yeah, wonderful. So very lucky for that. And I think... and that's what I'm trying to give my son as well, you know, and I'd love to help other children to get that kind of opportunity, because I think if you've had that freedom, authenticity and nature in your very earliest years, then that's very formative.
Now, in this Money Talk slot, we tend to have, you know, policymakers, business, high rollers, but we thought we'd do something different to mix it up a bit. You run a not-for-profit business, a not-for-profit organisation. Tell me how that works.
It's an organisation that's been built on a mission rather than on profit being the primary aim. So the mission has always been the same, although what we do through Explorers Connect has changed over the last 12 years. But the mission is to connect people to adventure, to connect explorers to each other. And when I say explorers, I mean everyone. You know, I think there's an explorer in everyone. So it's about creating opportunities for people to find adventure. And actually, over the years, it was initially very much about big expeditions, but now it's much more about smaller adventures, because I realise that's where we can make greater impact.
So the smaller adventures will be more local, generally in the UK, close to where people live, and that makes it easier to get younger people involved, maybe more vulnerable members of the community involved as well.
Yes, there's all sorts of services to help for free, to help people join up and create adventure teams to go and do their own things. Also training, because a little bit of training can give you the confidence to go and do more. And also I run some adventures for people to join, which is obviously the easiest way to get in there as well.
And how does the funding work, Belinda? Do people pay for the adventures that you organise, that you help supply? Do you get grant funding? Do you get any public money, any charitable donations? Or I imagine a mixture of all those things.
Yeah, the idea was always to try to create something sustainable, so that the paid-for adventures would pay for all the free services and also pay for free spaces on the training courses and other things, and adventures, so that people who maybe are doing great work or simply can't afford it can join those.
And so tell us about some of the adventures that you've held, that you've made possible, both big ones and more modest, but say more accessible ones.
Do you mean over my career, or sorry?
In particularly for Explorers Connect, as part of the sort of charity work.
Oh, so I run an expedition leadership course a couple of times a year. A lot of those places go to people who are going to go on, and it's like training the trainer. So they're going to go on and take... I had someone there who's particularly running, organising trips for refugees to go and help them to build resilience and so on through adventure, because adventure is so good for you. It's so divorced from our everyday. So particularly people who can help to go and do those sorts of things. Also, something new that's coming up for next year is, well, actually, I haven't done, well, it's not new, I haven't done it for a while, is mini expeditions, walking across Dartmoor, just things that are adventurous and challenging, but are not so intimidating that people won't sign up.
But still worthwhile. You still want a sense of achievement when you've done it, right?
Exactly.
There has to be a bit of danger, a bit of risk, a bit of a sense, can I do this? Yes, I can do it.
It's about building resilience. It's about finding out what you can do. And the thing that people talk about so much is about feeling alive. And you know, we need people who are engaged and feeling alive in the world, because the adventure is fantastic, but it's what you take away from the adventure. When you leave your adventure and you go back to your everyday life and career and families and relationships, it's those extra pieces of you that you take back.
Tell us a little bit more about the really big adventures that you've done that have stretched you. I mean, rowing around Britain, did you do it on your own? That's an astonishing thing to do. That must be several thousand miles, pretty inhospitable sea as well, quite rough in places.
Yeah. It's funny, I've spent a huge chunk of my career going overseas, thinking adventure is overseas, and yet probably the hardest and toughest challenge I've done to date, because I'm not finished yet, is rowing around Britain.
Wow. Which way did you go, clockwise or anti-clockwise?
Any sailors out there will know that clockwise is the sensible way to go, except, unfortunately, the weather didn't do what it was supposed to do, so it made it harder. But yes, it took 52 days. We eventually got round and became the first women to row around Britain, and the second boat ever.
Astonishing. How long did it... 52 days?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Did you...
In a 24-foot boat.
Were you at sea the whole time, or did you come ashore to sleep?
No, it's completely... In order to get the Guinness World Record,
right,
it was completely non-stop, unsupported, so nothing could come onto the boat. There was no...
so you're desalinating water and... all. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You must have hit some big seas.
We had sort of force 9 gales and so on in the... I think... and then also you've got some of the strongest conflicting currents in the world are in British waters.
Yes.
So, and some of the busiest shipping lanes. So... Yes, as I say, I've been all over the world, and yet the hardest thing I've done was right here. But that's kind of what's exciting about it as well. I got to see Britain from a completely new point or standpoint, and we had amazing wildlife and so on attracted to the boat.
And you've done some work with Bear Grylls as well, who's obviously another very well-known explorer involved with the Scout Association and so on. What did you guys do together?
So I've helped set up expeditions, filming trips for some of the early days of Bear Grylls' career. He's an incredibly positive person to work with, and I love what he's done with the Scouts now. He's rejuvenated what is such an important movement. So we hung out in the Alps. We were climbing around in glaciers in Alaska. We've worked in slot canyons in the Moab, all over the place, really.
You're a mum, and I'm a father of 3. To what extent do you think to what extent do you think the generation that our kids belong to, as opposed to us, are missing out on a childhood that we have? Are we over-parenting? Are we mollycoddling our kids too much? There's lots of talk about helicopter parenting, parents constantly hovering over kids, wondering what they're doing, rather than, you know, you get on your bike at 8 o'clock in the morning in summer holiday and you don't come back till 8 o'clock at night and no one knows where you are, but it's all fine.
I couldn't agree more. But I don't think it's something that we should be pointing fingers at parents. It's a societal change. The statistics are terrifying. The area in which children used to play now versus my childhood in the 70s, 80s, has shrunk by 90%. Because we can't let our kids out of our sight. So all that exploring, authenticity, learning to take our own risks, learning to look after ourselves, learning to fall down and get back up and dust ourselves off and carry on, all of those wonderful lessons that we could learn, and so many of us could learn back 30 years ago or so, 30, 40 years ago, we've kind of, society has moved to a place where we're more fearful. Whether it be traffic, stranger danger, obviously screens screen-based media is a huge problem as well. All of these pressures have created a cotton wool generation And we're already seeing the issues with that.
How do we break out of that, Belinda? We can't uninvent the iPad. We can't uninvent 24-hour rolling news, which some people would say has added to that sense of stranger danger, when actually, if you look at the ghastly, as the statistics are, the statistics on harm coming to children, kids being accosted, murdered, it's actually pretty much the same as it was when we were kids. Not to, of course, disrespect parents who have had awful, and kids who have had awful experiences. But how do we get from where we were to where we should be again, given that kids have become more or less mobile, there is a lot more obesity around? Do politicians have a role? Do community groups like the Scouts, non-for-profit businesses like your own have a role?
Gosh, there's so much to say to that. I think we can't go back.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can recognise the opportunities we have, and we can look at evidence-based interventions and behaviours that we can bring in. And one of the most wonderful ones is adventure.
Yeah.
Adding adventure. I think the idea that nature is good for us has become very mainstream now. That there's obviously enormous amounts of data out there. And so it's an easier time to talk about adventure. It's not just about going into nature, it's about what you do when you're there. Taking challenges, natural challenges outdoors, is the most natural way to challenge ourselves. And choosing challenge gives us a chance to build resilience, to find out what we're capable of, it's a great way of building relationships, learning how to face fear. And it allows children, and all of us, in fact, to build ourselves up. Instead of, there's so much of society now that kind of breaks us down, like social media, that breaks us down and is harmful for our mental health and physical health. Adventure is the most natural, it's a panacea in my book. It's a great way of opening new opportunities. And there's massive amounts of data to prove that as well.
Massive physical and psychological, mental benefits to adventure. But what would you say to people watching who, you're a very inspiring person, you've maybe piqued their interest, yet they don't have much money, they don't have much time, they can't really get away for long periods. What can they do to bring more kind of physical adventure into their life? Is it a case of, walking around the park, finding local forests, rambling, just getting out in the great outdoors? Maybe a lot of people are doing free swimming now, aren't they? Paddle boarding on rivers. So there does seem to be the stirrings of a slightly more adventurous society. Maybe I'm imagining it as we come out of lockdown. What do you think?
I think that we are, and it's a great opportunity to say, well, why have we all been drawn to this? Why are we drawn to this, and why do we want to add this to our lives? Because instinctively, I think so many of us know it's good for us. And so you can do things like join your local climbing club, go to a climbing wall. They're pretty much in every city and town. Yeah. You can join up to a kayaking club or learn your first, join up to do your first stand-up paddleboarding lesson. While swimming, like you said, fantastic.
And if you can't stand up straight away, you can kneel for a while, can't you?
Yeah. There is absolutely no wrong way of doing it. As long as you're out there trying, it's all about choosing to challenge and pushing yourself. There's a wonderful story that I love to talk about that is about a young man called Sam who had a very difficult start in life and had suffered from anxiety and depression to the point where he'd become an elective mute, which meant that he could speak but had chosen not to. Yeah. And, of course, his parents had tried everything.
How troubling.
Yes. And his parents heard about a surf therapy project, a sort of pilot study, and they put him on this 6-week course. Thanks to their fantastically forward-thinking GP, who put him forward through social prescribing. He joined 6 weeks of surfing. Through that, he fell off his board. He got back up again. He built resilience,
confidence, camaraderie.
Camaraderie,
and it brought him out of himself and managed to not completely cure him, but really help him to turn a corner and begin the process of
more than that,
renewal.
Actually. This is such a wonderful thing. So he was falling off the board and learning resilience, and And then he was building relationships, as you said, and experiencing positive joy and achievement. And then on the last day, his parents were both there on the beach to watch him. He suddenly spoke to his instructor.
How moving.
I know.
Now, talking of telling great stories, you've written this book, which we're pleased to plug, Adventure Revolution. There it is, Adventure Revolution by Belinda Kirk. This is clearly, more than a job for you, isn't it? This is a vocation. This is a mission. This is your salvation. So, what are your plans for the future? More adventures, you say. You got a few more adventures in you.
Always more adventures. Adventure has been my therapy and has saved my life. And I've seen it, so over 26 years of taking people on adventures, I've seen it change and transform other people.
We're quite good at adventures, the Brits, aren't we? We sort of, go to the poles.
Well, we used to be really good at them, but I think we've lost something recently. And we need to get back to our sort of British identity of being great
adventurers.
Francis
Chichester, Edmund Hillary.
Yes. No, we're good at summit. Let's all summit our own mountains. I'd love to see adventure in schools again. I'd love to work more around that, and help people. The book is to inspire people to live more adventurously and find out how they can do that in just small ways, and how it will make them feel more and more alive and become their best versions of themselves.
It's been great to talk to you. Thanks a lot. That was Belinda Kirk there. Something different from our regular Money Talks interviews. And there are similar conversations with major players in the world of business and finance that you can listen to now on my podcast, Money Talks, and on the GBNews YouTube channel, or via my Money Talks podcast on Apple Podcasts.